Asia. Now, in addition, there's going to be increased movement out west. And so Congress is going to pass a series of laws during the Civil War that's going to help with promoting Western expansion, one of which was known as the Homestead Act. Now, the Homestead Act basically said that anybody who moved out west would receive 160 acres of land. An acre is a measurement of how much land area. But the condition was that as long as you went out west and were willing to improve the land, you were able to be granted 160 acres. That was quite a sizable amount of land. But as we'll find out later on, it may not be the case for, say, a commercial farmer. But just keep in mind the Homestead Act is going to be one important piece of legislation that's going to lead to farmers and other agriculturalists move out west. You also have the Morrill Act. The Morrill Act is going to capitalize on the Homestead Act, and what's going to do is it's going to allow for the construction of schools. In particular, states are going to be able to sell land and use that money to construct colleges and universities. And that's going to be especially important when it comes to promoting education. This is going to be an important way in order to establish the University of California system that we have today, beginning with the founding of Berkeley, of the University of California, Berkeley, and then followed by all of the other schools in that particular system. So this is going to be of high importance. It's going to lead to this expansion of higher education from the Ivy League East further west and allowing for promotion of education. Now, we also talked a bit about the Transcontinental Railroad in the previous slide. To capitalize on what we talked about, the Transcontinental Railroad has a long history of innovations and a lot of difficulties too. Basically, the way it worked when constructing this railroad was you had two different railroad companies, each one working to build railroad lines in opposite directions so they would meet each other in the middle. And you had the Union Pacific Railroad Company, which we mentioned in the previous class, which was involved in a corruption scandal under Grant's presidential administration. But the Union Pacific Railroad is going to start from the East Coast. It's going to build west. And then another railroad company known as the Central Pacific Railroad Company is going to start building from California, and it's going to build eastward. And if you had to name which company encountered a more difficult time in building the railroads, you could almost certainly say it was the Central Pacific, the one that was building from the west to east. And the reason why was because of the terrain. If you look at a map of the United States, the continental United States, you'll see that as you try to build from the Central Valley and the coastline of California, you encounter a formidable obstacle, and that is the Rocky Mountains along with the Sierra Nevada. And so the only way to get around those was to go through. And the way they got through them was to use explosives, either gunpowder deposits or eventually later on, dynamite, after Alfred Nobel invents the dynamite and also nitroglycerin, which is another chemical that's used in explosions